We'll start with the website, otbsports.com. Let's have a look at what is on the homepage. It is our own OTBAM article, and then you've got the hotel was above a lap dancing club, Darren O'Dea on Euro 2012, and all the shenanigans going on around that, and learning from Trap. That is Kieran Bradley's piece. He was on off the ball over the course of the weekend, Darren O'Dea. Elsewhere on the homepage, British and Irish Lions Tour moved to South Africa is one of the stories under the rugby headlines, but you've also got Jose Mourinho is the best in the world when things are going well. Ranking and evaluating the NFL's best offences, and Jurgen Klopp has sights set on Premier League points records. Just one comment in before we move on to your first paper, dear Nathan, from Welton Man on YouTube. Chelsea able to spend money because of a transfer ban, so mismanagement allowed them to spend money when other clubs could not. Not bad for a club who made a £96 million loss last year.
Yeah, I don't think they felt they were particularly fortunate when they had that transfer ban, and maybe they are going to be the sole beneficiary of this pandemic in the Premier League, that things worked out. They had and I know you're talking about a £96 million loss, but maybe all the money they had planned and spending in the summer of 2019, they had held back, and that things could work out quite nicely considering the amount of brilliant young players that they also managed to develop so far this season, bringing through the likes of Mason Mount. We saw Billy Gilmore emerging towards the latter stages of the league campaign as well. Maybe it does work out. Well, football is unfair, unfortunately.
Yeah, and the other thing there that I just wanted to get your take on actually was just about the whole idea of this Liverpool title party, and it's kind of mentioned there with Klopp talking about chasing the points record. Shane mentioned it, Joe Anderson being in favour of the Merseyside derby taking place at Goodison Park, and him previously having voiced his opposition to the match being played at Goodison, and that the police have already said that they wouldn't object to Everton hosting the match despite fears that the Red supporters could congregate around the ground. Like, is this unbelievably unfair on Liverpool fans to just be throwing this out there that all of Liverpool is suddenly going to congregate, knowing the risk that might bring to the community there? Like, are we being completely unfair on football fans as a whole and not trusting them enough to say, like, if there's a Premier League one in an empty stadium, that you will automatically just show up? Like, do we not give them a bit more credit than that?
Yeah, I think it's clear from the start it's been incredibly unfair on football fans, but is that not the way the British establishment has always been? So we see pictures day in, day out from the UK of huge gatherings, whether it's 25 degrees and there's thousands of people at the beach. How many people are going to turn up? Worst case scenario, Liverpool win the league at Goodison Park. How many people are going to congregate outside Anfield or outside Goodison Park? Maybe you might get a couple of thousand outside, which again doesn't seem to be a huge issue as long as people aren't gathering together indoors. So it is just trying to focus on football fans that they can't be trusted. Like, that has never been lost within British society, that football fans, deep down, there's still this thought process that there's this massive hooligan element and they can't be trusted and they have to constantly be told what to do. And all of this, reading about it over the weekend, came from initially the Premier League were obviously so desperate for football to come back that when they first started having the conversations, they were open to anything. And the Premier League were, well, if we need to play games behind closed doors, we'll play games behind closed doors. And it seemed to gather a little bit of momentum. But everything you hear from all the different police departments in the UK is that they don't seem to have a major issue with this. It's not like there is going to be a Liverpool parade a week later down through the city centre, down by the Albert Dock. That's not going to happen. So you're not going to have 100,000 people around Anfield or around Goodison Park. Maybe you do get a small amount of people, maybe you get a couple of thousand. But again, how many gatherings have there been outside in the UK over the last couple of weeks where there have been a few thousand people in somewhat close proximity? It's not an ideal scenario, but you don't see this national outrage against them. So I don't understand why it's football supporters, and it seems to be Liverpool supporters in particular, that they feel just can't be trusted.
Yeah, it is interesting. It seems that they would like their cake and eat it quite a bit when it comes to the UK government, that they will push forward the football as this great PR shining light on how they're getting back to normal in society. But you can't have too much of that good thing because we can't trust football fans. That seems to be the tone coming from over there. That is otbsports.com at the moment. You can read more of Jurgen Klopp's comments on there right now. You're leading with the Irish Independent.
Yeah, giant photograph on the back of the Irish Independent, familiar one as well. Ray Houghton heading the ball past Peter Shilton. They're running a series all week in the Irish Independent on Ireland's adventures at European and World Cups, from Stuttgart to Lyon when the nation held its breath. The other story on the Irish Independent is lines hit out at negative misrepresentation as racing gets ready to return. This is Ger Lyons, the trainer, questioning the criticism that is there of racing's rush to return in many ways. A lot of this obviously stemming from Cheltenham going ahead, and whether you blame the British authorities or the racing authorities for it going ahead. But Ger Lyons, the Meath trainer, says, I don't get this consistent negativity thrown towards us. I make no apologies for going back to work. I'm not embarrassed to go back to work. If that offends you, F off. I don't give a damn, is one way of writing it. There's so many negatives being written here. Horsey people have been looked after again. That's not the case. He says, our game has changed a lot since I was a kid. A lot of misrepresentation. They automatically think of tax exiles, etc., whereas a lot of us out here just getting up every day and walking the roads and doing our jobs. It's very much a business. A lot of misconceptions. I think he makes a lot of good points there. There's a lot of comparing apples and oranges here when it comes to the different sports and how the GEA are going and how horse racing and are some being prioritised. Like, some of these are in more dire need and are in far more of a rush to keep the business side of things going. So likewise, while the GA are getting criticism, the FAI are pretty much running off a similar timeline in terms of getting pitches open and getting people back playing. And one of the things we saw on Friday is that elite professional sport can return. So you see that the 4 European teams in the League of Ireland, they're allowed to come back. All our Olympians are now allowed to go back training from today. But those with amateur status have been treated differently. I don't see a major, if everything's been done right in horse racing, if all other businesses are opening today, well, there's no reason why horse racing shouldn't be allowed to do it either. And again, there's no reason why they shouldn't be trusted.
For sure. And it is that lead story on the front of the Irish Examiner sports section as well. Joseph O'Brien saying a lot of the protocols would have been happening in the yards anyway. Naas, of course, playing host to today's marquee occasion, the first major sporting event in these shores since Ireland went into lockdown after the threat of COVID-19. Joseph O'Brien is quoted in this. He's saying it's a virus. We've seen it time and time again. When something goes through a yard, it could finish it for the year. So in that regard, everyone will be fairly aware anyway, though obviously not to the extent we have been in recent times. You've obviously got a situation here today where Jessica Harrington can't attend a race meeting because of her age. She says, my own opinion is that we should be able to make up our own minds. If you're over 70 and you have underlying health conditions, you shouldn't go. But if you are healthy, what is the difference between you and a 69-year-old? And then there's, of course, a breakdown here of all the summer sport. Slowly but surely we're getting back to normal. And it's a handy little timeline of events there in the Irish Examiner. And the lead story here from John Fogarty and from a GEA perspective is that Croker may have to become all-seater in social distancing era. The capacity of Croke Park will be 21,000 after the 5,000 limit is lifted by the government, according to John Fogarty here. However, that would double to 42,000 was social distancing be reduced to 1 metre. Bucket seats would have to be installed on Hill 16 for large games in the stadium, which is an interesting one because you look at what the RFU are saying in the Irish Times this morning, and it kind of is different, to be honest, because they're thinking about how do they feel at Twickenham, for example, and Bill Sweeney has said if you use 2 metres in an 80,000-seater stadium and factor in traffic flow, such as someone wanting to use a toilet without going past someone and touching them, it reduces your capacity to between 9,000 and 9,500. So the RFU are looking at an 80,000-seater stadium and saying we can get less than 10,000 people in there. The GEA are looking at an 80,000 people stadium and saying we can get over 20,000 people in there. There is a disparity here, and I'm not sure has there been any official word from health authorities on where to fall down in this. I don't think it's necessarily a situation where you take a percentage of the capacity and that is that because you can social distance in your seat. There are walkways, a very narrow walkway around certain areas of Croke Park, getting in and out of your seat, going to the bathroom, especially if you've got double headers in the stadium and all that sort of thing. I just wonder, has this been seen through to the nth degree that we are certainly going to have 21,000 people in Croke Park at some point this year?
No, I don't think it has. I think it's still too fresh for that. And again, it does feel like there's a lot of crude maths going into that. So we divide it by a quarter. If it's 2 minutes, 2 meters, we divide it in half. Again, as you say, how do people get in and out of the stadium? Is there, does it take 2 hours to get in and out of going to a match now? I'm not quite sure. And also, so say, for example, if you've got a family of 5, there's no reason why the 5 in the family can't sit together. There's no reason why everybody in a household can't sit together. So how does that work from a ticketing point of view? Again, Can you get more people in that way? Do you sell a certain amount of family tickets and they all sit one per row and you divide it up? It sounds incredibly complicated to do that, but perhaps it's worthwhile if it gets more people into the stadium, gets more revenue for the GEA.
You've just stumbled upon the golden ticket there for the GEA, I think. Prioritise households and family passes, have little pods for them, and therefore you can get a fuller stadium like that. Of course, family passes would be cheaper. Like, I've often wondered, like, who will be prioritised here when it comes to the 21,000? Is it season ticket holders? Like, those people who were looking at the small print and feeling they were screwed over by the GEA earlier in the year, are they now thinking to themselves and rubbing their hands, we're the lucky ones now because we've got a season ticket and we're going to be the first in? Like, premium ticket holders, John Horn mentioned that as well, they're going to have to be accredited the following year, he says. That it's a bit of a disaster for premium ticket holders this year because they all have their seats.
No corporate boxes?
Not for you this year anyway. Like, I mean, I'm not sure who your guy or your woman is that sorts you out with your corporate box special seat for Mayo semi-final every year, but they might not be able to sort you out this year. What would it be like, actually, if it was a Mayo All-Ireland win just before Christmas? Would that be the sweetest way to do it, or would it be an empty Croke Park kind of crap?
You see, I've had this discussion with a few people about the GEA potentially coming back. And listen, like, you talk to the players, the vast majority of players are saying they want to get back. They would play behind closed doors. Dreamland, fantasy stuff. Like, Mayo winning an All-Ireland in front of an empty stadium with no supporters there, with no homecoming allowed. I don't know.
So you're saying if somebody offered that to you now, you'd be like, no.
Well, we'd probably just
we've waited long enough.
Let's take it and worry about it. At least then the curse would be gone, and we'd have moved on, and we could enter a period of domination. I'll tell you one thing: I wouldn't fancy sitting at the back of Hill 16 on the 22nd of December for an All-Ireland final
in a bucket seat. No, that's a good point, actually. That is a really good point. That would be a terrible. In fairness, it would be better than the opening league match, more than likely. Like, it'd be similar. Like, there's nowhere colder in the world than the top tier of either stand in Croke Park if the wind is blowing. No, it's bad. But the opening icebreaker every Christmas is it's Fierce Mild this Christmas, and that has been the ongoing theme for the last 10 years. So I welcome a mid-December Hill 16 experience as opposed to a National League one. But that is the Irish Examiner this morning. Plenty happening.
Yeah, let's move on to the Times, which has a picture of Rio Ferdinand. He was at a Black Lives Matters march in London yesterday, and FA chief wants plan for more black leaders. So the conversation very much moving on now around English sport, from not just racist abuse, but also how many black people are involved in the running of the game. And Paul Elliott, the former player, is very much involved in the FA, asking that question now, what the FA's plans are to increase the representation from that community. Elsewhere, owners to miss Mersey Derby because of the quarantine rules in the UK. The Liverpool owners would need to be in by now so they can quarantine for 2 weeks. They're going to let up to 300 people, it seems, in one way or another around Premier League matches. So some owners may be allowed into the games, and clubs push to lower wage cap. This is in rugby. So a majority of Premiership clubs are looking for the wage cap to be reduced from 7 million, and also to get rid of the marquee player rule. So I think everybody feels that rugby is entering a really uncertain period in terms of wages and in terms of we consistently hear, because the international game is just so important, and how much revenue comes from the international game and the hosting of those autumn and internationals and Six Nations games. And if they happen behind closed doors, it's going to be a huge blow. And it seems now with the club game as well, the players are going to take the hit, and clubs are realising that they're just simply not going to be able to afford to pay those players. So some tough times, you'd imagine, coming for a lot of the professional rugby players.
The Irish Times this morning leads with Rory Croke's piece that billion-euro industry continues to be self-regulated. This is a story that came up prior to and during the election, and I think everything that comes with the general election this year has obviously been put to one side for obvious reasons. He's been writing that it's 7 years since Fine Gael attempted to begin process of regulating gambling. Jim O'Callaghan of Fianna Fáil has been drafting gambling control bill, which could, among other things, according to the piece, see the creation of a gambling regulator that could ban live in-play betting, ban betting with a credit card, and curb gambling advertising. The regulator would also be self-funded by a levy on gambling industry. It's interesting stuff. It's been a big part of the Fianna Fáil manifesto going into this year's general election. There is that piece that I've already mentioned. Gavin Comiskey, IRFU, expected to lobby for a reduction of physical distancing to 1 metre. So the RFU are planning on getting involved in the politicking on this in the UK, and the RFU are going to do the same, because if they can reduce the 2 metre rule to a 1 metre rule, then you can get a hell of a lot more people into the stadium. So as I've already mentioned, the RFU figure that with a 2 metre rule, your capacity in Twickenham is between 9 and 9,500 people. But if you can get it to 1 metre, which is the World Health Organization's guidance, you could get close to 40,000. So there's a disparity. It's not necessarily just doubling up if you half the distance. You can actually quadruple the amount of people in the stadium. This is according to Bill Sweeney, the RFU chief executive. So a good piece there by Gavin Cummesky. And then Brian O'Connor saying racing has a chance to lure new fans as it becomes first sport to return. As we said at the top of the show, it's basically got a 9-day window to win the hearts and minds of everybody, because it has the stage to itself.
Then we have the back page of the Mirror story we were talking about earlier on. Hold tight. Jurgen Klopp insists his Reds will eventually have their Champions Bus Parade, even if people think we're a bit crazy. So Jurgen Klopp saying even if it's next year, they're going to have their parade to celebrate winning the title. But Anfield boss warns club can't now afford to make 50, 60 million signings while asking players to take big pay cuts. Now, as far as I know, Liverpool players haven't taken a huge pay cut so far, but maybe they're looking down the track. And if supporters aren't allowed back into the stadium next season, maybe players will have to take a pay cut. So Liverpool, obviously, that around the Timo Werner story. Similar story just above that. No virus discount for 100 million Koulibaly. This is for Manchester United. Interesting signing Koulibaly from Napoli, but there is going to be no change to their stance in the transfer market. They still want the 100 million for Koulibaly. And Kenny, another young English player shining bright in the Bundesliga. That's John Joe Kenny, who's on loan at Schalke from Everton and scored for Schalke over the weekend.
The Irish Daily Star this morning leads with that open top bus story. Open Klopp bus tour is their headline. Jurgen says Poole will wait for their right to party. The power of love, all you need is love. Ryan Moore riding love to win the 1,000 guineas at Newmarket yesterday. A slew of potential puns on that one. August target for Aviva fans. Meanwhile, writes Derek Foley, the RFU could be allowed to play games at the Aviva Stadium in front of as many as 25,000 supporters in late August. Horan, Hill may have bucket seats. That's GA President John Horan saying bucket seats may have to be installed in Hill 16. And also that Kalidou Koulibaly story. United told to cool the jets on Kalidou.
The back of the Mail, Jofra stand up to racism. This is the England cricket player Jofra Archer backing the Black Lives Matter campaign. The picture is of the players of Union Berlin and Schalke, who took the knee yesterday ahead of their game in tribute to the Black Lives Matter campaign. And also Klopp admits Werner U-turn down to money. So again, that story from Jurgen Klopp that Liverpool simply had to back out of signing Timo Werner because they could no longer afford it.
The Irish Sun here is a light in the dark. Klopp says with cash woes and virus, £54 million on Werner could be a leap in the dark. I should have read the little words before I read the big words. Horan seat 16 for Croker. John Horan last night revealed installing bucket seats in Hill 16 is an option when the GEA reopens Croke Park for matches. And City ban CAS for concern. Manchester City will go head-to-head with UEFA today to avoid a black hole of up to £200 million. So interesting times in that case. Will it be a top 5 or a top 4? We should know, hopefully, in the next couple of days.
On the back of The Guardian, call for Truth Commission. British sports so structurally racist, it's a kind of apartheid. It's an interesting story, an exclusive from Sean Ingle. Chris Grant, who is one of the most high-profile black administrators in British sport, saying that British sport may need a South African-style Truth and Reconciliation Commission to tackle what he sees is an inherent racism in administration. So that's covered on a couple of the British newspapers today. Another one from a purely footballing point of view, Nkaggia refuses extension on West Ham deal to finish season. And I was watching about Charlton at the weekend. So Charlton have 3 of their best players out of contract at the end of the season. They're right down in the relegation zone in the Championship. And the 3 of them all have moves lined up to bigger clubs because they're out of contract and don't want to play. And that may well become a bit of an issue as well. For some of those teams in the Premier League. We haven't heard a huge amount about it. Like, there's a lot of players out of contract. You look at the likes of Jeff Hendrick at Burnley, you would expect the vast majority of them will go on and play out the season. But for some players, they just think the risk of injury is too much when there is absolutely no guarantee if they do get injured that they'll have a club next season.
It's a remarkably tricky situation for people in that at the moment. The Daily Telegraph is next up for me. City confident of beating two-year European ban is their headline on their CAS hearing. Club bullish ahead of court appeal against UEFA today. Chief Executive says they have irrefutable evidence. ITV doubles Guinea's ratings. Meanwhile, a lot of people watching the racing at the weekend. Roses contribute 35 grand to sponsor women's golf series. Meanwhile, this is Justin Rose and his wife Kate, who are to sponsor a series of women's golf tournaments for British professionals starting on June 18th. Neutral venues could still be used when Top Flight returns, writes Jeremy Wilson. And the big story here from the Daily Telegraph this morning, which ties in nicely to what you were saying about the Bundesliga at the top of the show, Nathan. Fan songs will enhance empty grounds, writes Matt Law. Home goals to be marked by pre-recorded chants. Premier League plans to boost viewing experience. So there is a new Broadcast Enhancement Advisory Group which exists. I didn't know about their existence, but this Broadcast Enhancement Advisory Group is going to try and improve the viewing experience for fans with games behind closed doors. Some of the ideas that came out from last Thursday's meeting are as follows. Pre-recorded supporter songs to mark goals by the home team. Sounds pretty good. Fan walls beamed into the stadium and through television. So I don't think you'll have your Harold Shipman cardboard cutout. These will be, I presume, like Instagram walls, like you might have on the big screen in Croke Park. Stadium dressing to help disguise empty seats and minimise echo. That's also a very good point. The echo when you're hearing the audio coming straight from the pitch is a little bit jarring, so that will actually stop a little bit of the echo. Players recording their own pre-match features for television. I'm not sure what exactly that means, but
there was talk last week that it would be in and around the dressing rooms, that they would basically do shorted, again, Instagram-style selfie videos.
So Jesse Lingard having
behind. Exactly. That can only go down an absolute treat. I can see it already. Jesse Lingard band, flashback to studio. There's Roy Keane and Graham Souness. Glorious.
Supporters given the option to hear FIFA 20 crowd noise at home. Fixed cameras in the tunnel area. And now, stadiums will be able to use pre-recorded supporter songs at kickoff. This is in the stadium, pumping stuff into the stadium, not just in...
So they'll play You'll Never Walk Alone as normal at Anfield.
Yes, but they can also do it to mark goals by the home team, substitutions for the home team, half-time, full-time, and VAR delays. So it won't get to the level of the NBA where you can actually play music mid-play. But when the ball is out of play and when there's delays for VAR and stuff like that, you can play whatever you want. So step up, Mr. DJ, and play the tunes. It's like it kind of reminds me of your man from Sunderland Till I Die, who wanted to change the Tiesto song to something else, and he was playing it into an empty stadium to massive echoes. That is what every CEO is going to be for the next few weeks.
Part of me does wonder how much of all this, let's get as much noise as possible around the game, is to make sure that we do not hear the players talking to each other and the language that comes out of the players. Because I have commentated on behind closed doors games before. I might have touched on this. I commentated on a game involving Jetro Willems, who's now with Newcastle. He was sent off in a Europa League game last year. He was sent off right on the halfway line, just in front of the two dugouts. And it turns out Jetro has very good English for what he was calling the referee. I mean, every profanity under the sun was uttered by Jetro. It was, it's tough to explain.
I can imagine. You're next up with the Herald.
I don't have the Herald. I'm sure it's great, though. The
Herald is fantastic this morning. I'll root that out in just a second. But we'll bring you the Irish news, which leads with quotes from Jamar Hall. Racism has been an issue throughout my sporting career. This is the Armagh footballer Jamar Hall, who's been out to talk, and there is a couple of pictures from Newmarket as well yesterday. Love getting the business done yesterday. And I will root out this Herald, and it is a Croker will be half full. Only 21,000 allowed until social distancing is reduced. And Klopp aims for points record tally. Also Stuttgart to Lyon when the nation held its breath for our heroic boys in green. So that is the Herald. One more look at the brand new OTB Sports app this morning. It is our brand new home for everything we do across off the ball. Pretty happy with it, look at that. So to download it, just search for OTB Sports in your App Store or the Google Play Store. You can see the feed here with all the latest sports news. Then there is a live radio function right beside that at the bottom left as well, where you can listen to OTB AM as a breakfast radio show every morning. In the video tab then as well beside that, you've got the OTB Podcast Network, where we're bringing you over 40 new podcasts every week, so you can subscribe to your favourite series and listen live on the app. So plenty happening there this morning. As I say, download it on the App Store or on the Google Play Store if you've got an Android.